happens when your government is controlled by right-wing religious nuts. They will end up destroying your nation, thinking they can do whatever in the name of God, religion, or whatever excuses they like to use. The Israeli economy is being destroyed by Hitler and his right-wing cronies and the genocide against the Palestinians. This is one reason why Hitler is constantly telling the United States that they need more money and more weapons because they themselves cannot sustain their own genocide and they need outside help to do it. You got people leaving the Israeli government, people that are moving their money out of the Israeli government because they can see that the Israeli economy is decreasing. It's losing. They're not making money anymore when they gotta spend all this money on trying to genocide Palestinians. The Israeli government and the Israeli nation is going to implode because of Hitler and his right-wing cronies.
News endlessly, seemingly no end in sight. The U.S. limply looks on, makes some meaningless, disgruntled noises from time to time, some superpower we are. The ICJ ordered Israel to stop its genocidal attacks, to no avail. The ICC's threatened arrest warrants, well, they have failed to materialize as of yet, and we all wait with bated breath to see if Iran's retaliation in response to Israel's provocation will plunge the whole region into an even bigger and much more deadly war. It often feels like the Israeli state can just act with impunity, raining terror down on a trapped population with no one and nothing able or willing to stop them. But just below the surface, a doom spiral for the Israeli state may already have been set into motion, a mounting economic calamity that threatens to collapse the state entirely. The BDS movement, in their wildest dreams, could never have imagined the economic toll that the Israeli state is basically inflicting on itself right now as we speak. So here are the details. Mondo Weiss compiled what data is available on the Israeli economy, and the picture is really quite dire. Quote, over 46,000 businesses have gone bankrupt. Tourism has stopped. Israel's credit rating was lowered. Israeli bonds are sold at the prices of almost junk bond levels. And the foreign investments that have already dropped by 60% in the first quarter of 2023 as a result of the policies of Israel's far-right government before October 7th show no prospects of recovery.
So what is the Israeli government going to do? How are they going to keep making money if nobody's investing in the Israeli government? Nobody's buying their bonds because they're worthless. And the fact that so many businesses have gone bankrupt because of the Israeli government. This isn't because of Hamas. This is because of the right-wing Israeli government itself. And this is a problem when you have right-wing religious nuts controlling a government.
Majority of the money invested in Israeli investment funds was diverted to investments abroad because Israelis do not want their own pension funds and insurance funds or their own savings to be tied to the fate of the state of Israel. Now,
So even Israelis know that it's not a good idea to invest in the Israeli government because they're not going to have their retirements or their pension funds, or their investments are not going to make anything. This goes to show that the Israeli government is losing this war. Up to 60,000 Israeli businesses may close in 2024. Yeah, that's a lot of businesses to have close or to go bankrupt. Like, just, I mean, imagine if anywhere else, 60,000 businesses just go bankrupt. Like, that is not good for your economy.
those business closures, they may actually just be the beginning. An estimate cited by the Times of Israel found that up to 60,000 businesses might close before 2024 is over. This is a greater impact than the COVID pandemic shutdown and would only be exacerbated by an expanded war with Hezbollah and with Iran, the impacts of which, frankly, would be unfathomable. Just think about the realities right now, though, for the Israeli economy. Israeli workers have been called up to participate in the Gaza annihilation, undercutting the country's much celebrated tech sector. Another key sector, tourism, has completely dried up. Construction is at a standstill because the Palestinians that Israel relies on as cheap labor force have been banned from coming to work outside of the occupied territories. Israeli
Yeah, that's funny how a government that hates Palestinians to the point of claiming every single Palestinian, uh, at, they use them as, cheap labor. Like, you can't hate these people and then also depend upon them to do construction. It's like in the United States, where migrants are uh, a necessity because they do a lot of work in the United States, but you have right wingers with the extreme hate towards them. And when they ban migrants from coming to the United States, like in Florida, the crops are rotting. There's no construction really going on anymore. And the economy is failing because you don't have those migrants putting money into the economy. The Israeli government is just killing itself with its own racist hate.
attempts to import foreign workers as a new source of cheap labor have been largely unsuccessful. Turkey has announced a ban on exports to Israel, further crippling the construction industry. And efforts to import from other nations are hampered by the efforts of the Houthis to block shipping into Israeli ports. 200
I got all I can say is good job on the Houthis for crippling the Israeli government. This was one of their plans on stopping ships from uh, sending anything to the Israeli government because they knew if they could stop ships from giving stuff to the Israeli government, it's going to cripple their nation. You can call them terrorists if you want, but they're helping Palestinians defend themselves.
50,000 Israelis continue to be internally displaced as a result of the tit for tat war with Hezbollah. And panic has set in as Iran threatens a large response to the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh that occurred on their soil. Now, perhaps the biggest body blow, however, was Intel pulling out of a planned $25 billion investment in the state of Israel, an indication that capital is engaged in their own self-interested BDS, weighing the ever-rising risks of operating in Israel to be greater than the benefits. Even more trouble, though, could be ahead. Here again is Mondo Weiss. Israel's power grid, which has largely switched to natural gas, still depends on coal to supply demand. The biggest supplier of coal to Israel is Colombia, which announced that it would suspend coal shipments to Israel as long as the genocide was ongoing. After Colombia, the next two biggest suppliers are South Africa and Russia. Without reliable and continuous electricity, Israel will no longer be able to pretend to be a developed economy.
Okay, yeah, Colombia and South Africa is definitely not going to help Israel with, Colombia cutting off shipments to the Israeli government and South Africa suing the Israeli government for apartheid and genocide. I mean, is the Israeli government going to depend on Russia for help? Because if they do, that means that they're not really good guys if they're going to get their, energy supply from another right-wing government committing a genocide against Ukrainian people and doing an invasion. What is the Israeli government going to do when they don't have the ability to create the energy needed to keep their nation, alive? Because once you can't create energy for your nation is going to fail.
So while the US will apparently never cut Israel off of literally anything, including the 2,000-pound bombs that they used to drop on schools where displaced children are sheltering, the rest of the world apparently not so keen to continue doing business with this terrorist regime. There's another dynamic.
That is because every single president so far, since like the creation of the Israeli government, have been religious Zionists who only care about the existence of the Israeli government. They're religious right-wing nuts.
Dynamic that's a little harder to quantify here, though. It came up in our recent interview with an Israeli Zionist analyst, Shael Ben Ephraim, who we brought in to discuss the right-wing riots that broke out in Israel to protect the right of Israeli soldiers to rape and torture Palestinian detainees. I asked Shael what this trend meant for the future of Israel if they continue to drift towards lawlessness and a state governed overtly by Jewish supremacy. I was frankly a little bit shocked by his response.
Imagine somebody telling you that they have the right to rape other people. You would be like, yeah, you're an and you should be in prison. But when it's the Israeli government and right-wing Israelis, you got a ton of people in the United States that are like, yeah, those people have the right to rape and torture people. It's no surprise that so many Americans were in favor of Gitmo, a torture center where people were sent to without charge or trial and were raped and tortured.
I think there's going to be a lot of people in Israel who, if this continues to be the kind of government that they have in the long term, will leave. And those will be the most productive members of society. Those will be the high-tech leaders. Those will be the professors. Those will be the literati and so on and so forth, which is something that I think the extreme right in Israel wants, because that will help them run the country better. And there's an attempt to dismantle the Israeli judicial system, because that's the one check and balance the Israeli system has against this kind of power. So right now, Israel, similar to a lot of other countries in the West, or the United States, as an example, is having a battle for its soul. And I think if the liberal democratic forces in Israel lose, Israel will be lost. It's not going to be able to survive if it doesn't have allies in the world, and it's going to be sanctioned by everyone, treated like a pariah state. That liberal part of the country is what kept Israel as part of the international community, and what kept it allied with the United States, and what kept it as a big trade partner for the EU. And if Israel loses that, it's not going to be able to survive. The extreme right fringe and the fundamentalists aren't going to be able to support the Israeli economy, aren't going to be able to support Israeli society, not in the long term. Many don't serve in the army. It's a disaster for Israel if these people take over, and this is a step towards taking over. Like, make no mistake, they're hindering the functioning of the state. If they completely take over, the state of Israel will not exist in the long term. And I think that's quite a possibility.